50 KTRS. This story was first reported in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, now getting some national attention with the Huffington Post as well as other outlets. Melissa Jelson is a senior reporter at the Huffington Post. Good morning, Melissa.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. I read this story and my jaw hit the floor yesterday. Fill us in about this woman who was living in Maplewood here in St. Louis, and she was being abused by her boyfriend. What happened?
Yeah, so Rosetta Watson is a 58-year-old black woman with disabilities, and she was living in Maplewood in 2011 and 2012. She was renting a private residence with a Section 8 housing voucher, and she was struggling with a physically violent and abusive boyfriend, which we know at least 1 in 4 women in the U.S. will face at some point in their lives. 4 times she called the police seeking protection. She told them that her ex had shoved her, punched her in the face with a closed fist, strangled her, and at times wouldn't leave her house. And because of that, according to the lawsuit just filed by the ACLU, Maplewood kicked her out of her home and actually wouldn't allow her to rent another property in the city for 6 months under their local ordinance. So they have a local law that if you make more than 2 calls to the cops regarding domestic violence within 180 days, that can qualify as a quote-unquote nuisance. And if you violate that rule, you can be evicted, which is what happened to her. So the ACLU is saying, this law really punishes domestic violence victims and is unconstitutional.
Just so I understand you correctly, the town of Maplewood here in St. Louis, which is right in the heart of, Maplewood is a little tiny suburb right in the heart of St. Louis, has a law that says you can only call the police twice for domestic violence. After that, it's a nuisance?
Yes, if it's within 180 days. So if you make more than 2 calls, that can be considered a nuisance and they can kick you out. And their law does not differentiate if you are a victim of the crime or a perpetrator. So for her, she was just a victim experiencing these multiple incidences of physical violence, and yet her calls to the police for help really resulted in her getting kicked out and endangering her life. She ended up homeless for a period of time. She lost her housing voucher. So it had very serious consequences for her. She was also afraid to call the police after, as you can imagine, after calling police resulted in her being evicted. When she was abused again, she was in St. Louis. She was afraid to call even after she was stabbed in the legs. So she ended up going to the hospital, and the hospital called police, and her partner was then arrested and incarcerated. But it had a long-term effect on her in which she was afraid to call the police because she saw what happened to her, last time she called.
When you say she was evicted, they took her occupancy permit away. So
Yes.
She couldn't rent another house in Maplewood.
That's what's so crazy. It's not as if she was just kicked out of that one house, which would have been bad enough, but they revoked her occupancy permit, which is needed to live in the city. So she literally had to leave the city. She couldn't legally live anywhere. So obviously had to leave friends and family and have her life really disrupted. And we know that domestic violence is one of the leading causes of homelessness for women and families across the nation. So you can see here how that played out. It was very hard. She lost her housing voucher because she couldn't renew her lease, so then she had a very hard time finding more affordable housing. So really had a snowball effect.
Melissa, have you heard of anything like this around the country?
Yeah, the ACLU has actually been really on top of these so-called nuisance laws. One woman that I talked to there said she's heard of them in at least 30 states. And they've really gone systematically around the country and filed lawsuits for domestic violence victims in different locations trying to have these laws overturned. And they've been quite successful. I think at least 2 jurisdictions have overturned these laws after the ACLU has brought suit. So it's possible that might happen in this case as well.
Yeah, we should say that the ex-boyfriend has since died, and we should also say that Maplewood hasn't responded. They didn't respond to the Post-Dispatch. I don't know if you had a quote from them, but it seems like they're not talking.
Yeah, I left a message and I haven't heard back. I think I saw in the New York Times the city manager said they haven't actually been served the suit yet, so they're not going to respond until they see the suit. But reading it, it's pretty disturbing what they're alleging.
It's unbelievable. Melissa Jelson, senior reporter with the Huffington Post. Melissa, thanks for checking in.
Thank you so much.
You got it. 7:56, Big 550, KTRS. That's unbelievable, that story.
It really is. And I really wish that the city of Maplewood would comment. I know that in the Post-Dispatch article, the city manager wanted to see the lawsuit first before he commented, but he did say that they didn't make the decision based on race, creed, gender.
They made it on stupidity, sheer stupidity.
I mean, it's mind-boggling to me.
Poor woman gets evicted because she's being battered and abused by her ex-boyfriend.
I know that there are many 911 calls that are pretty nuisance calls that people do make.
Right. My coffee's not hot enough. The guy in front of me won't get out of my way.
Yes, some pretty ridiculous claims that people make.
Somebody's grass is too high. No, I get that. Right.
But with this is someone's life that could be in danger.
I can't believe this isn't getting more attention.
It's
unbelievable that it isn't like Maplewood is a nice bedroom community that I get it. It's on the books for whatever reason, but the fact that they would enforce it and kick this woman out of her house and then say, sorry, you can't live anywhere else in this town because you don't have an occupancy permit because you're too much of a nuisance.
Yes.
Why am I a nuisance? Because your boyfriend keeps beating you up and you have to call us to save the problem. Wow. 7:57, Big 550.